I had a toxic, entitled sister who was kicked out after scamming our parents. Now, she's pleading with me for a place to crash, but little did she know I had something brutal in store for her. I'm 27 male, and I grew up in a modest suburban neighborhood with my mom, dad, and my older sister. She's 3 years older than me. My dad worked at the local factory for what felt like forever, and my mom took on part-time jobs to help keep us afloat. Our house wasn't anything fancy, but it was livable. For a while, I looked up to my sister. She was loud, confident, and seemed to always get what she wanted. But as I got older, I realized her real talent was lying, guilt-tripping, and acting like the world owed her something. By the time I was 15 and she was 18, she was already pulling shady stunts to avoid doing chores and blaming me for things she messed up. My parents would brush it off as typical teenage drama or sibling fights, hoping she'd grow out of it, but she never did. Before she left for the first time, we had a massive argument about cleaning the shared bathroom. She refused to do her part. I didn't back down. So she locked herself in a room and told my mom I'd threatened her. It was a complete lie. My parents didn't exactly believe her, but they basically begged me to do the chores just to keep the peace. It was frustrating. This was my reality now. She moved out soon after to stay with a friend, and for a brief moment, my parents and I could breathe easier without her constant drama. But 3 months later, she was back, claiming her friend had betrayed her. Of course, my soft-hearted parents let her move in again. This started a cycle where she'd live at home, freeload off everyone, stir up drama, and then leave again, only to return a few months later. By the time I was 20 and she was 23, she had jumped from job to job, constantly claiming every workplace was toxic, every manager was horrible, and every coworker was jealous of her. The truth was, she never stuck around long enough to build any career. She'd cry about needing money for emergencies, but then blow it on random weekend trips. My parents, although frustrated, still gave her money because they felt guilty. Meanwhile, I had taken a steady job in a warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid my bills and allowed me to save up. I even moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near my parents. When my sister turned 25, she pulled one of her biggest scams yet. She convinced my mom to give her a large portion of their savings for some business idea she promised would be a big success. Although my parents were hesitant, they gave in, hoping she'd finally get her life together. A few months later, she came crawling back, claiming her business partner had scammed her. No receipts, no paperwork, no proof. Dad was furious, but she argued he should trust her, and somehow he let it slide just to keep the peace. Eventually, she left again, couch surfing at various friends' places, all while leaving a trail of unpaid rent behind. People would tell us horror stories of how she'd talked them into covering her expenses, only to disappear without a trace. My parents were humiliated, but they didn't know how to stop her. It felt like trying to control a tornado. When I turned 25 and she was 28, I was fed up with the entire situation. I focused on my warehouse job and tried to help my parents whenever I could, since they were still dealing with her debts. Then she showed up at my parents' house again, promising she had changed. She swore she'd do chores and help with the bills. For a short while, she played the part, buying groceries with my mom and helping around the house, but it was all an act. She began intercepting mail, forging Dad's signature on documents, and draining whatever little my parents had left. Finally, Dad had enough. He kicked her out for good, with Mom's reluctant agreement. My sister threw a tantrum and called them. She stormed off, ungrateful, and disappeared for a few months. During that time, things were relatively peaceful. My parents were under a lot of financial stress, but at least the drama had calmed down. Then, one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. To my surprise, it was my sister, crying and saying she had nowhere to go. She claimed everyone else had wronged her and begged me to let her stay at my apartment. I remembered all her past manipulative behavior and how she'd played my parents. But despite it all, part of me felt bad for her. I told her I'd think about it, but deep down, I was already plotting how to protect myself. A few days later, she showed up at my apartment with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, as if she planned on staying forever. Before she could start unloading her things, I set the rules. I told her she'd have to help with rent or at least pitch in for groceries once she found a job. She had to respect my privacy and stay out of my personal space, and under no circumstances was she to tamper with my mail. She rolled her eyes, flipping her hair, and said, "Are you serious? I'm your sister, and you want me to sign a contract or something." I just told her to take it or leave it. She huffed, but, seeing no other option, agreed. Over the next few days, I noticed her acting shady. Whenever I left for work, she'd shoot me suspicious glances. She'd ask to borrow my car and rummage around the kitchen, opening drawers that clearly didn't contain food. My gut told me she was looking for something valuable to take. So, I started locking up my important belongings in a cabinet in my bedroom closet. I also set up a small security camera in the living room, pointing toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. If she tried anything, I wanted to have proof. She spent her days doing nothing, watching TV, scrolling on her phone, and complaining that she couldn't find a job because everyone was out to get her. I gave her a week to show me job applications. She blew me off and acted like I was a villain. Then she began texting my mom, playing the victim, saying I was threatening to throw her out. My mom called, upset, but I explained everything. Dad told me not to let her manipulate me, so I stood my ground. Sure enough, I came home early one day to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. Inside, she was rifling through my nightstand, already having taken an old pair of headphones. I cleared my throat, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. She tried to pass it off as searching for a charger, but I pointed to my headphones in her bag. She denied it, but I opened her bag and pulled them out. Caught. I told her to pack her things and leave immediately. She freaked out, yelling that I was overreacting. So I showed her the footage from the security camera. She realized she had been recorded. I reminded her of all the terrible things she'd done, stealing from our parents, forging their signatures, and told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. She tried to challenge me, but I stayed calm and firm, telling her I was done with her. That same night, she left, cursing me the entire way out. Once she was gone, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders, though I was still shaking with anger. A few days later, Dad called, saying she'd been bombarding their phones, claiming I had blackmailed her. I explained I had video evidence of her stealing, and I warned her that if she messed with me again, I'd use it. Dad sighed and said they were looking into pressing charges against her for forging their signatures and scamming them out of a large sum of money. As messed up as it sounds, I felt a sense of relief. Maybe the legal pressure would finally make her realize she couldn't just keep ruining people's lives. Things calmed down for a while, but then one evening, I found a note on my car. It said, "Stop threatening me or you'll regret it." My car door had a fresh scratch on it. I snapped a picture of it and figured it had to be her. No one else had a motive to threaten me. I saved the photo and texted my parents about it. Dad was furious, but said we had no solid proof. I considered calling the cops, but there wasn't much to go on except for the note. That same week, my sister showed up at my door around midnight, her eyes swollen from crying. She claimed she'd angered the wrong people, had no place to stay, and was practically begging. She was shaking, but given her history, I was beyond suspicious. I only cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying we were once close, that I was her brother, and so on. I flatly told her I didn't trust her. I reminded her of the note on my car and told her to leave. She pouted and called me a monster before storming off. The next day, I told my parents. Dad suggested I improve the security, so I upgraded my door lock and installed a better camera system. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad were preparing to press charges against her. She was supposed to start paying them back for the money she had stolen, but, of course, she didn't. Dad gave her a final warning. If she didn't pay it back, they'd take legal action. She just made excuses. Eventually, they took things seriously and consulted with an attorney, who confirmed they could press charges for forgery and financial abuse. Mom was heartbroken but backed Dad up. My uncle, Dad's brother, also got involved. He was fed up with her behavior and wanted her to face the consequences. We arranged a family meeting at my parents' house, Dad, Mom, Uncle, and me. My sister showed up late, acting all self-important, like she was the victim. Dad presented all the evidence, and my uncle told her to stop lying. She tried spinning some wild story, claiming the money wasn't that much and that she would pay it back eventually. We all just stared at her. Dad finally said, "Either you commit to paying us back, or we're pressing charges." She screamed that we were all out to ruin her life and stormed out. About 2 weeks later, she still hadn't done anything. Dad kept expressing how frustrated he was, and eventually he said, "That's it. I'm filing a claim." Their attorney drafted papers to demand repayment, warning that if she didn't respond, they would sue her. Meanwhile, my sister tried to cause more family drama, calling a distant cousin and accusing my parents of abuse and me of blackmailing her. The cousin called Dad, who explained the real story, and the cousin basically said, "Wow, sorry, I had no idea." Another door slammed on her. After that, she went completely radio silent. Dad moved forward with the legal process, and it looked like it would eventually lead to a court date unless she settled. Then, one evening, she showed up at my apartment again, looking completely wrecked. She asked to come in, and like an idiot, I let her in just enough so we weren't yelling in the hallway. She begged me for money, claiming she needed it to pay back Mom and Dad before they took her to court. She promised to pay me back in installments, acting like she was a client at a bank or something. I flatly told her no. She demanded to know why I was being so cold. I laughed and said, "What do you expect? You literally stole from our parents and tried to steal from me. You threatened me, left notes on my car. Why would I help you?" She kept pushing, asking if I could at least delete the video from my security camera. I told her there was no way I was covering up anything for her. That set her off. She yelled at me, stormed out, dragging her duffel bag along with her. A few days later, Dad called to say she missed another deadline. They had officially filed the paperwork, and she was served a legal letter demanding repayment or facing a lawsuit. She ignored it for a while, but once she realized they weren't backing down, she finally contacted their lawyer. She agreed to a legally binding repayment plan, where she would pay a fixed amount each month until she settled the debt. If she missed a payment, they could take her straight to court. Dad shared the update with me, sounding relieved but also exhausted. Apparently, she took on a couple of part-time jobs to scrape together some money. She's still behind on her own bills, but at least Dad and Mom started seeing some repayments. They're still dealing with the aftermath, though. Her theft put them in a tough spot for a while. Uncle checks in on them regularly to make sure they're okay, but he's not holding his breath that she'll stick to the repayment plan. At least for now, there's some form of justice. As for me, life is moving forward. I still work at the warehouse, hang out with friends, and keep my security cameras running. I'm not about to deal with another break-in or intimidation attempt. Sometimes I feel strange about how everything turned out. After all, she's my sister, but the damage she caused was enormous. She tore through my parents' savings and almost dragged me down with her nonsense. If a legal agreement is what it takes for her to learn responsibility, then that's what she'll get. She tried to scam our parents out of their money, got kicked out, and then had the nerve to beg me for a place to stay. I had a harsh surprise waiting for her: accountability. Some might think I'm being tough, but you know what? I'd rather be tough than let her destroy my life like she almost did to my parents. If she truly wants to turn her life around, she can stick to her job, keep up with the repayments, and stop blaming everyone else for her mess. But that's on her, not me. And that's the story of my entitled sister, who scammed our parents and tried to mooch off me, only to learn the hard way that I'm no longer the naive kid she used to take advantage of. At this point, I'm just glad to have my apartment back in one piece, and my parents are finally free from her constant manipulations. It's not a perfect ending. She's still out there, likely complaining about how life's unfair, but at least she can't pull the same stunts without facing real consequences. Honestly, that's all I ever wanted. No more drama, no more lies, and no more letting her get away with everything just because we share the same blood. So, welcome to reality, sis.